The skies over Europe have changed their rules. In a war where drones costing only a few $1,000s can pierce air defense systems worth millions, defenders are now paying far more than attackers for the first time in modern conflict. That imbalance is not only draining Ukraine night after night, it is forcing all of Europe to confront a painful question: can we still rely on 20th century air defense models in a 21st century battlefield? The unexpected answer comes from Germany, a nation long defined by caution for 80 years. In October 2025, Berlin unveiled a new doctrine: cost, sustainable defense, a model where software, data, and alliance-based networks sit at the center. No more aid packages delivered in bulk, no more waiting for approvals, a declaration that the old era is done. And to understand why Germany is confident enough to rewrite the rules, we have to start with the cost equation that is quietly eroding every front line. 21st century warfare has reshaped the skies. Instead of multi-million-dollar aircraft, Ukraine's nights are now filled with small, inexpensive battlefield drones that learn, adapt, and swarm. They fly low, evade radar, overwhelm sensors, and generate far more targets than any traditional air defense system can reasonably process. The more defenders intercept, the more they spend, the more attackers launch, the cheaper it becomes. A brutally lopsided equation. This imbalance has created a painful reality. To stop a UAV worth only a few $1,000s, Ukraine often must fire interceptors that cost hundreds of thousands. Repeated night after night, no country, not even wealthy NATO states, can sustain that burn rate. The economics of defense simply do not add up. Germany was one of the first to say out loud what others quietly feared. This war does not demand more expensive weapons. It demands an entirely different model, one where each interception becomes cheap, efficient, and infinitely scalable. Berlin understood that unless the cost equation flips, Europe will remain strategically exhausted in every drone-driven conflict. So instead of sending aid in bulk shipments, Germany pivoted toward co-creating a new defense architecture built around coordinated software, centralized data, and distributed air defense. This became the foundation of the program announced in October 2025, not just to protect Ukraine, but to pull Europe out of a cost spiral with no end. But the true turning point lies in a weapon almost no one expected, one that costs only a few $1,000s per interception. When Berlin unveiled its new defense model, what startled foreign military delegations was not the quantity of equipment Germany planned to send, but the way Germany intended to use it. This was no longer about pouring more weapons into a burning battlefield. It was about engineering a defensive architecture that could operate for years, adapt daily, and stay viable even under strained budgets. Germany did not chase numbers, nor did it join a firepower race. Instead, it chose to build a system that maximizes software, data, and low operating costs. The entire model begins with one clear philosophy: cheap, electric, modular, and software first. In a world where low-cost drones can strike hundreds of times per night, any country that clings to expensive interception will eventually collapse under its own costs. Germany understood this long before many of its partners, and that realization pushed Berlin toward a three-layer air defense architecture in which each tier serves a distinct role, yet all actions are coordinated through one central software brain. At the top layer, the Patriot system intercepts high-end threats such as ballistic missiles and fast cruise missiles. It remains one of the strongest air defense systems on the planet, but it is also the most expensive to operate. In the new model, Patriot is activated only when the lower layers cannot resolve the threat, dramatically reducing the waste of high-value interceptors. The mid-range layer is handled by IRIS-T, SLM, and SLS, acting as the backbone of the network. These systems are ideal for low-flying cruise missiles, fixed-wing aircraft, and certain categories of high-speed drones. The cost of each shot is not minimal, but it is far cheaper than the top layer. This middle tier ensures that defended zones maintain an efficient balance of performance and cost. But it is the low-tier layer where the true revolution happens. Skynex enters the stage not through size or complexity, but through its ability to overturn the economics of modern war. With fully electric firing, rapid reaction times, and a per-intercept cost of only $4,000, Skynex turns cheap drone swarms into a manageable, sustainable threat. The system consumes no fuel, requires minimal downtime, and its modular structure lets it deploy at the front line, on borders beside civilian infrastructure, or near industrial zones. By flipping the cost equation, it forces attackers to spend more with each strike, eroding the very tactic they rely on. The strength of Germany's model does not arise from any single layer, but from the moment all three are linked through a unified battlefield control software. Built jointly by Germany and Ukraine, this system binds every radar, sensor, and interceptor into one network. When a target appears, the algorithm immediately determines its type, altitude, speed, trajectory, and selects the cheapest effective layer for interception. If it is a low-flying small drone, Skynex responds. If it is a cruise missile, Iris-T takes over. If it is a strategic threat, Patriot shifts into readiness. All of this happens in seconds faster than any officer could manually decide. The reason software sits at the center is its ability to learn continuously. Every attack leaves behind data, control frequencies, mimic patterns, drone spread behavior, dive angles. All of it feeds into the algorithm resimulated and updated to counter the next variant. What once required weeks in traditional systems now occurs within hours. If the enemy changes tactics in the morning, the system has an adaptation ready by night. To guarantee round-the-clock operation, Germany did not merely ship hardware and leave Ukraine to manage it. Instead, it built on-site repair and upgrade capacity. Facilities in Niv and Vinnytsia can replace modules within a day, recalibrate sensors in hours, and receive software updates directly from the shared Berlin-Kyiv network. This transforms the air defense architecture into a living system, one that evolves in near real time and never lags behind the pace of technological warfare. At the same time, Germany has funded long-range, low-cost UAV production lines, not only for offensive use, but to generate data that fuels the defensive algorithm. The more data the network absorbs, the more accurate it becomes. The more accurate it is, the cheaper each interception becomes. This is the loop that every nation facing a war of attrition must eventually embrace. Germany's model is not an arsenal, it is an ecosystem. It does not seek victory through overwhelming firepower, but through sustainable defense that forces opponents to pay more with every strike they launch. This is why many analysts argue that Germany has opened a new chapter in European defense, a system built not on the biggest missile, but on the most rational cost, the fastest learning cycle, and the highest long-term survivability. But only when this model entered real combat did Europe finally realize that the economics of modern war had been completely rewritten. For decades, every modern defense model operated under an unwritten rule: defense is always more expensive than offense. To protect the skies, nations were forced to pay billions for sophisticated systems, while attackers only needed to send a few dozen low-cost aircraft to generate constant pressure. This imbalance exhausted Ukraine during the early years of the conflict and raised fears inside NATO that a prolonged war of attrition could drain even the wealthiest democracies. But when Germany's new defense model entered real combat, that equation was overturned for the first time in decades in a way few believed was possible. The reversal began with the cost of intercepting each target. In the past, a $10,000 UAV forced defenders to fire a missile worth 10 or even 100 times more. Every night of air defense activity was a night of financial bleeding. But once Skynex became the foundation of the lowest tier, interception costs collapsed. A programmer in Berlin remarked that each Skynex round is so cheap that drones no longer function as an efficient attrition weapon, and the battlefield proved him right. When a $10,000 drone can be neutralized with a $4,000 burst, the economic advantage immediately shifts toward the defenders. And when that dynamic repeats hundreds of times, the strategic landscape changes entirely. What matters is not simply that Skynex is inexpensive, but that the battlefield control software forces every tier of the air defense network to operate according to cost logic. Instead of reacting by habit, the system evaluates every target by value, threat level, and the cheapest effective intercept option. A small drone is no longer locked by a mid-range missile. A low-flying UAV is no longer met with a Patriot interceptor. Every layer is used in its proper role, at its proper moment, and at its proper cost. As a result, overall operating expenditures fell by nearly half in the first few months, even as interception efficiency rose by more than 40%. The shift became impossible to ignore during a summer night in 2025 in eastern Ukraine, when a complex strike of drones and cruise missiles was launched to test the system's integrity. The moment long-range radar detected the first wave, the software split the incoming threats into three streams: high-altitude targets tagged for Patriot, mid-range threats routed to IRST, and low-level drones delegated to Skynex. The allocation took less than 2 seconds faster than a combat crew could issue verbal instructions. As the drones dipped lower, the Skynex algorithm assumed control, calculating firing angles designed to maximize effect and minimize cost. Each burst was calibrated to achieve the highest probability of kill with the lowest possible expenditure. Despite the attack arriving in multiple waves, the total defensive cost remained far below the value the attackers spent launching their UAVs. NATO analysts later described Germany's model as one that turned cheap offense into an expensive strategy for the enemy. To overcome the new air defense network, attackers could no longer rely on low-cost drones. They were forced to deploy larger, faster, smarter, and more expensive systems. This created a cost escalation on the attacking side, not on the defending one. This was the pivot European strategists had waited years to see. As attackers realized cheap drones no longer created openings, they shifted to heavier electronic jamming. Jammer arrays attempted to scramble radar returns and disrupt the data flowing to the central command software. But because the network was distributed and algorithms could be updated within hours, the German model adapted rapidly. Sensors switched frequencies, software analyzed jamming signatures, and new filtering profiles were generated to cut through the interference. When drones began performing vertical dive attacks to confuse targeting systems, the algorithm flagged the abnormal trajectories and recalibrated Skynex firing arcs, maintaining consistent performance. Many observers said the system learned to fight after only a handful of engagements. The most important factor sustaining Germany's cost advantage is the model's ability to operate continuously without demanding massive budgets for re-equipment. With on-site software updates, same-day module swaps, and component production inside Ukraine, the network maintains tempo even under harsh weather or prolonged attacks. This is the birth of a sustainable defense model where logistics is not a barrier and cost is not a burden. The core truth European nations recognized after watching Germany's model in real combat is surprisingly simple. Defense does not have to be more expensive than offense. When cost is structured correctly and when software sits at the center, defenders can maintain long-term advantage without risking economic collapse. This is something unseen in generations of modern warfare, where money has traditionally been the defining advantage. This time, the advantage belongs to logic, data, and adaptation. But as the economic advantage emerged, a new question surfaced. Can this model remain effective against the technical and tactical limits now appearing on the horizon? As European nations monitored Germany's new defense model month by month, the first realization was that the system's operational reach was far broader than its technical specifications suggested. Although designed to counter Tier 1 to Tier 3 drones and mid-sized loitering munitions, Berlin's three-layer network proved capable of handling far more complex scenarios thanks to intelligent tiering and continuous learning from battlefield data. Small, low-flying UAVs, sometimes no larger than a backpack and notoriously difficult for traditional radar to detect, fell neatly into Skynex's optimized engagement zone once sensors were fine-tuned through new algorithms. Larger or faster drones were routed to IRST, which continued to deliver an ideal balance between cost and performance with every launch. The network's effectiveness did not come from the individual layers themselves, but from the speed of coordination between them. When layered radar detected a mid-altitude target, the battlefield control software instantly compared it to past attack patterns, then selected the most cost-efficient interception window. To prevent unnecessary ammunition expenditure, The algorithm constantly assessed whether the target was a slow drone, a drone with enhanced jamming capabilities, or a subsonic cruise missile. Choosing the correct tier not only optimized cost but ensured each system operated within its highest efficiency envelope. Yet this very efficiency exposed one of the model's most important limitations: its heavy dependence on sensor quality and data reliability. Once adversaries began employing complex jamming techniques, many radar returns became incomplete or distorted, forcing the software to spend valuable time reconstructing missing data before selecting an optimal response. Although the system managed these situations well, distinguishing noise from genuine targets added pressure to the lower-tier systems, especially when target numbers spiked dramatically within short time frames. The algorithm can learn quickly, but its learning speed still depends on clean data, and the enemy constantly works to break that foundation. Another challenge came from decoy drones. Some unmanned aircraft were designed solely to generate false signals or trigger multiple radar sweeps, pushing the system into cycles of unnecessary low-cost firing. Even with Skynex's inexpensive ammunition, large waves of decoys could still create a consumptive spiral if recognition layers failed to separate real threats from false ones. German engineers improved identification algorithms by analyzing micro-oscillations in radar reflections, but risks remain as adversaries introduce increasingly sophisticated decoys. The most significant limitation lies in the nature of distributed defense. With each Skynex or IRIS-T unit capable of operating independently, distributed structure reduces vulnerability to concentrated strikes, but it also introduces brief synchronization delays when multiple sensor nodes must confirm data across separate stations. These delays are extremely short, but for high-speed drones or steep dive attacks, even fractions of a second can place significant strain on the lower tiers. This is why Germany maintains a human oversight layer to minimize the risk of automated decisions based on incomplete data. Despite these constraints, the system maintains strong effectiveness through its ability to expand coverage. As more Skynex or IRIS-T units are deployed, the defense perimeter grows like a mesh, not a line. This creates a far more flexible shield, especially around civilian infrastructure such as power plants, central rail hubs, or critical logistics corridors. Each new module adds sensor data into the network, improving overall accuracy and reducing vulnerability to localized jamming attacks. These combined strengths make Germany's model a sustainable defensive tool, but not an unlimited one. In a battle space where jamming, spoofing, and decoys grow increasingly sophisticated, the decisive question is no longer how many targets can be shot down, but rather how accurately can the system distinguish what is real from what is not. This raises a deeper challenge about long-term reliability as adversaries continue to evolve their methods of penetration. And from those very limitations, an even more difficult ethical question emerges: what role will humans play as air defense systems grow increasingly intelligent? As Germany's new defense model proved its effectiveness, a deeper question began circulating across European security conferences. What happens when software, not humans, becomes the primary factor determining the speed of an interception? Older air defense systems revolved around human crews, but in the new model, algorithms form the technical brain behind most decisions. Reaction times measured in seconds force operators to place near total trust in the system, and that trust introduces ethical challenges no previous generation has fully resolved. The first issue is technical risk. Any defense network built on data links is vulnerable to manipulation, from heavy jamming and cyber intrusions to sophisticated signal injection. A well-crafted false return could cause the system to waste ammunition, or worse, distort its threat prioritization logic. Even though Germany's software includes multiple layers of filtering and cross-verification, the possibility of corrupted data can never be fully eliminated. This is why engineers maintain a mandatory human control layer, ensuring that every final firing authorization includes human involvement, even when the system's analysis arrives almost instantaneously. The next challenge concerns legal responsibility. When a semi-autonomous system can recommend, or even initiate certain technical procedures, who is accountable if something goes wrong? The algorithm designers? The operators? The approving authorities? European legal experts raised these questions repeatedly, warning that as air defense networks lean more heavily on algorithmic assessment, the boundary between personal responsibility and system responsibility becomes increasingly blurred. Germany responded by adopting high transparency standards. Every system decision is logged automatically, and all operating units must undergo regular audits to ensure the software never exceeds its allowed scope. But the challenges are not only technical or legal, they also stem from the adversary's growing ability to adapt. When drones carry intelligent decoys, when jamming frequencies shift hourly, and when enemy algorithms begin learning as quickly as those of the defenders, a new cycle of technological warfare emerges, one that forces the model to evolve faster than ever. Germany understands that maintaining the upper hand requires more than rapid software updates. It demands upholding the principle that humans retain ultimate authority. Speed may belong to machines, but ethical judgment must remain human. From this comes a larger question. How much automation can a defense network adopt before it clashes with the ethical standards of Europe and NATO? Allied nations agree that technology must not replace moral responsibility, and any deployed system must guarantee that humans remain the decision makers in the most sensitive moments. Even if algorithms are fast and accurate, war is still a domain where caution carries enormous value. This is the foundation of what European leaders consider the core of Germany's model, a system that is strong, intelligent, flexible, but never beyond the moral limits of the 21st century. For the model to endure, it must preserve a balance between automation, human oversight, and clear legal norms. And as adversaries develop new methods of penetration, the question is no longer how many targets the system can intercept, but whether it can maintain its strategic value in a world that is changing with unprecedented speed. And from that question, the full significance of Germany's model becomes visible. It is not merely Ukraine's shield, it may be the blueprint for Europe's future security. As Germany's new defense model moved beyond experimental deployment and became the backbone of Ukraine's protection strategy, analysts quickly realized its impact reached far beyond the success rate of individual interceptions or the performance of any single system. What was emerging was not merely a stronger shield, but a new concept of how democracies can maintain security in a world where technology evolves faster than political decisions. For decades, air superiority was defined by speed, altitude, and firepower. Germany's model introduces a different reality. Air superiority can also be built through cost discipline, adaptive software, and the resilience of a distributed network. This shift carries enormous significance for European nations whose defense budgets must constantly balance economic, social, and security priorities. When the cost of defense decreases while effectiveness increases, a new doorway opens toward applying this model to critical civilian infrastructure such as seaports, power plants, airports, and energy corridors. With proper adjustments, a distributed air defense network can protect these assets from low-cost threats, allowing smaller NATO states to avoid relying entirely on expensive long-range systems. This is not merely a technical advantage, it represents a strategic step toward greater autonomy for Europe's collective security. Another impact became visible just as quickly. Germany's defense model is reshaping how the defense industry itself functions. Instead of depending exclusively on large prime contractors and production cycles that stretch across many years, the new model encourages participation from software companies, startups, and algorithm developers. This opens the path to a more flexible defense ecosystem where critical updates are no longer tied to slow procurement timelines. Supply chains also become lighter and more modern, as modules can be swapped on demand and manufacturing capacity can be distributed among multiple allied nations. Perhaps the most meaningful aspect of this model lies in the philosophy it conveys. In the 21st century, security is not defined by the size of one's arsenal or the price of one's missiles, but by the ability to connect systems and optimize resources. Germany is demonstrating that intelligence, not firepower, can become the decisive factor in preserving international stability. This message is drawing the attention of countries outside Europe, as it offers a pathway relevant even for states with limited defense budgets. Yet Germany's model is not without limitations. It depends on high-quality data, on reliable cybersecurity, and on human adaptability. When part of strategic decision-making is shared with algorithms, maintaining vigilance, caution, and accountability becomes essential, but it is precisely this acknowledgement of limitations that makes the model credible. It recognizes that no matter how advanced technology becomes, it cannot replace the ethical responsibilities of human judgment in war. The true conclusion of Germany's model is not battlefield victory. It is a shift in the philosophy of security itself. It is a system designed not to defeat an enemy, but to discourage escalation before it begins. When the cost of attack rises and the cost of defense drops, the likelihood of conflict decreases over time. This is the essence of smart deterrence that Germany aims to promote, using technology to preserve peace rather than expand confrontation. In a volatile world where a single miscalculation can escalate into crisis within hours, a defense architecture capable of preventing mistakes is invaluable. Germany is presenting a blueprint for Europe's future security, one built on the fusion of technology, cost efficiency, and human responsibility. And if this model continues to evolve and spread, it may become a tool that helps democracies preserve peace for decades to come. The true strength of an alliance is not its ability to strike, but its ability to stop chaos before it begins.